Hi guys, in this video we'll be looking at size units, the magnification formula, using the magnification formula, using a triangle to rearrange, and then we'll finish with a summary. So first of all, before you start calculating things using the formulae, you need to know how to convert certain units to other units. So you need to be able to convert between size units. For example, the specimens that we'll be looking at are obviously very, very small, and we measure them in very small distances like micrometers and millimeters, sometimes even smaller than that. But the images that we might end up with might be a few centimeters large. So we need to be able to convert things between them in order to carry out these calculations. The units of distance are always based on a meter. So a meter is 100 centimeters, and you can subdivide this again and again and again. But the overall structure is based on a meter. So 1 meter is then divided up into centimeters, and then they're divided up into several parts as well. So the distances that we need to be aware of can be summarised in this table, and they are metre, centimetre, millimetre, micrometre, and then the smallest is nanometre. So let's just work through them here. We've got 1 metre, you prefix that with the little m. Make sure you don't write a capital M because that actually means molar and that's something else. So little m, and that's 1 metre, so we'll just call that the factor of 1. We then have centimetres which make up a metre. So we actually find that 100 centimetres make 1 single metre. So a centimetre is 100th of a metre. And then you can divide a centimetre into 10 millimetres. So 10 millimetres makes a centimetre. So when you divide the metre by a factor of 100 and then 10, you've got down to millimetres. So if there's 10 millimetres in a centimetre and there's 100 centimetres in a metre, you need 10 times 100 millimetres to make that 1 metre. So therefore a millimetre is 1,000th of that metre. And then every time you go down a scale, the fraction obviously gets smaller because they're tinier units. Millimetre has 1,000 micrometers, and a micrometer has 1,000 nanometers. So as you can imagine, these are absolutely tiny measurements, but they're always a factor of the previous distance, and you'd never be able to see these with the naked eye. And we can get an impression for these distances when you think about different structures, and you'll see them through biology. So for example, insects and small plants can be measured often in millimetres. If you were to put an ant on a ruler, it would probably take up around about a centimetre or less, so you'd measure that in millimetres. If you were to look at some cells or bacteria, cells tend to be a few micrometers in size, like a cell might be 20 micrometers. So you wouldn't see this with your eye, but this is another factor. And then eventually, when you get down to tiny particles like viruses and some molecules, you end up talking about the nanometer scale, which is absolutely tiny. So in order to go between these units, or to make a unit basically represented by another factor, you have to multiply and divide by certain numbers. So the same distance can be said if we said 1 meter, it's the same as 100 centimeters, which is the same as 1,000 millimeters. These are all exactly the same length of distance, it's just that we've expressed it in a different form. So we need to be able to express distances in different forms, and therefore this is conversion of units. So you can go back and forth between them if you know what to multiply by. So what we need to do, if you're going from meters to millimeters, you have to times this by 1,000, because there's always 1,000 millimeters in a meter. So if you had 1 meter, you would turn this into millimeters by timesing by 1,000, and you would get 1,000 millimeters. If you then go down from millimeters to micrometers, there are 1,000 micrometers in 1 millimeter. So again, you need to times by 1,000 for this one. So from 1 meter to 1 micrometer, 1 meter must be 1,000 times 1,000 micrometers. So a meter is 1,000,000 micrometers. It's the same distance, we've just expressed it in a different unit. So if you're ever going smaller, you multiply by however many there are in that previous stage. If you're going back up, you would divide by the factor. So if you were given the idea that there was 1,000 millimeters, how many meters is this? Well, to go back up to a bigger scale, how many millimeters are there? And then you divide by that number. So let's work through an example. The question says, how many micrometers are there in 0.04 meters? Well, we've got 0.04 meters is the distance, and we want to express this in micrometers. So to go down to millimeters, we have to always times by 1,000, because there are 1,000 of these in there. And to go down from millimeters to micrometers, we would times 1,000 again. So think of it as taking steps back down to smaller units. How far do you have to go? So then simply what you would do is 0.04 times 1 million. And this gives you the answer of 40,000. So what that's telling you is that in 0.04 meters, there are 40,000 micrometers. It's the same distance in reality, but they're expressed in different ways. So you can think of it in another way. 0.04 meters is 4 out of 100 of a meter. So that's basically 4 centimeters. And then 4 centimeters would be 40 millimeters. And if you were to times that by 1,000, which we do here, that would give you 40,000 micrometers. And always remember your units.